All right, welcome to another exciting episode of the Vagabond Gamecast.
Hello.
I don't think we ever use our name, so if you're listening for like the 20th time, welcome to the video game podcast.
Welcome.
How's it going?
If you're addressing myself, I am doing well. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. You talk as though there's someone else on the line here today.
That's because there might be for the first time ever.
Oh.
Welcome, Thomas.
Hey.
And in the background, it sounds like welcome, Matt's child.
I was going to say there's actually 4 people here. Yeah, so I got stuck with a baby tonight, which was unexpected. Wife is out. Was intending to bring her to kind of a little event she was having, but Luca has a cold. So since there's other babies at this event... Okay, come here. Since there's other babies at this event, she did not go along. And so I do apologize. We'll do the best we can to filter that out, but there might be some interference.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that's the nature of this game cast, because obviously Matt and I both have kids, and that's kind of a recurring thing. So, and I guess Thomas is a parent here, so hopefully everyone can kind of understand and get past that. We'll mute what we can. But so just a little bit of background stuff for anyone who's wondering, who are you?
My name's Tomas Guinan. I've been friends with Matt since we were kids. I guess I'm here to talk about the Eskimo Bob Kickstarter.
Eskimo Bob Kickstarter? That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I apologize. Maybe I should be leading the conversation since you're my acquaintance. I'm battling a kid here and so forth. Yeah, sorry. Thomas, Eskimo Bob. What can you tell us about Eskimo Bob? I'll jump in and throw that question there.
All right, sure. Eskimo Bob, it was a Flash cartoon series that my brother Alan and I started back in 2001. It was pretty popular on Newgrounds back then.
Yeah, this would have been well before YouTube, right?
Oh yeah, way before YouTube. It's back when it was all Newgrounds and badly animated Flash. That's what we had. Dial-up internet, all that fun stuff. And so it was pretty popular. There was I think it was up in the hundreds of thousands, possibly millions of views with some of the episodes on Newgrounds. We ended up making about 57 episodes and had a pretty good run.
Nice.
So if I can interject again, sorry. So we're asking about Eskimo Bob, obviously, because that's what your Kickstarter is. Used to be a cartoon. Now you've gone and developed it into an NES game.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Where we're going. So the cartoon itself, how long did you run that?
It went for quite a while. I think the last episode came out in 2013. Most of them,
wow. So
yeah, but that
10
I think
plus years.
Yeah, so it went on for a while. The bulk of the episodes were between 2001 and 2009. So.
Okay.
And it was mostly you, or were you and your brother a group?
It was me and my brother both worked on it. I did most of the animation and the grunt work. He did did some script writing, some voice recording, and that sort of thing.
Nice.
Cool.
Yeah.
So, what made you decide to start turning that into a video game then?
Well, it almost happened by accident. I've been taking computer science at Dalhousie, so I'm finishing that up. I had one course this semester. So I just happened to have some free time, and I thought, hey, I'll just look into NES homebrew. Seemed like a fun idea. I had just bought a retro USB AVS, and I bought a few homebrew titles along with that, and I thought, this is pretty fun. It got me interested in looking into doing that myself, so I do some Googling. I found out that there's some C libraries available for the NES, and I thought, oh, well, that's interesting. Found some tutorials, that sort of thing, and just started playing around with it. And the Eskimo Bob connection sort of came in because as it's sort of my playing around developed into an actual game, I thought, well, I already have characters, I already have music, I just have to sort of use them. So
Yeah, it seems like I mean, it definitely seems like it makes sense to just connect the dots like that if you've already got a property that you've worked with in the past.
Yeah.
So the way you described it sounds like it almost came about by accident. I'm just wondering if like you'd kind of thought a long time ago of maybe making a game of the Eskimo Bob IP, or if that's always been in your mind.
Well, it's actually kind of funny because I remember way back, 2001, 2002, we used to joke about it. We'd say like, I mean, I had made a few little Flash games for the website, but we used to joke and say, if we make it a real Eskimo Bob game, it should be for the NES. We'll release it on cartridge form, and nobody will be expecting, post 2000 for there to be an Eskimo Bob NES game. That would be hilarious. It was almost like we said it as a joke, but the idea it always just seemed like it would be a fun idea.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, if you're going to Dalhousie right now, do you have any sort of previous experience, or is this all like completely new grounds for you? Then, like,
well, I'm actually taking just finishing up. Actually, I just finished. I'm gonna be graduating in like a couple of weeks, but yeah, I was basically taking my computer science degree. I was getting a certificate in graphics, gaming, and media. So I did a lot of courses in like game design, used Unity and stuff like that. So modern game design. So I had a bit of knowledge of game design just from that perspective on things.
okay.
And I guess the idea of doing it with the NES, it was more just, it was for fun, and it turned into something. I thought, wow, this is actually fun. This is actually a game that I would play, and I rolled with it. Nice.
Cool. I guess that segs into the next question pretty well. Curious, like, I mean, you said you work with Unity. It sounds like maybe you've dabbled a bit, at least, in game development kind of stuff, if not a full-fledged project. Kind of wondering, like, working on the NES, what kind of, I guess, unexpected quirks did you meet? Or, like, what was it about working on the NES that made the experience unique?
Probably the weirdest thing is just the complete lack of space and memory. I'm working with such a small file. It's absolutely ridiculous. And I didn't use any weird mappers or anything like that. So the entire NES file, when all is said and done, is 40 kilobytes. And that's just ridiculous. It's just not going to happen now.
It's like a thumbnail.
We actually just last week were talking about that a little bit. How like the average NES game was smaller in file size than the average JPEG of today.
Yeah. It's really funny just how small you have to make it. It was funny because as I'm first making the game, and it was sort of in tech demo mode, I wasn't really concerned about it at all. And I'm making a game. I have about 4 levels done, and I'm thinking, this is pretty fun. I feel like I can do whatever I want. And then I just hit a wall. I'm like, okay, so I've got 4 levels, and that's it. So then I had to start thinking about, like, okay, what I'm going to do. I have to start I had to use, I'm programming mostly with C. There's a little bit of assembly in there, but not that much. Things like variables, I had to make everything a global variable.
Is that just because that's the way the library works, or?
Pretty much. That's what it said in the tutorials and whatever about the library that I read, was to use global variables for everything. So I did, but then there's a limit because there's only so many that I could fit in there before I start running out of space and memory banks here and there. I had to sort of create a compression algorithm to compress the level data, because...
Is that where most of the space is being eaten up, is level data?
Not really. If I had not figured out my compression, probably, but if we've got 40 kilobytes, that was divided into about 32 kilobytes of program and 8 of the PRG ROM and 8 kilobytes of the CHR ROM for the graphics. So 8 kilobytes of graphics. There's 32 kilobytes that are the actual program. I'd say of that, probably maybe 20 or so kilobytes is the game engine. maybe even more than that. So if I was to round that up to like 24 maybe for the game engine and the title screen and the ending and all the non-regular stuff, so that probably gave me about 8 kilobytes to fit the levels in the game.
And how many levels did you come out with in the end?
There's 64, so I'm pretty
64.
happy with myself. Yeah. I think
So that compression algorithm saved you a little bit there.
Yeah, it did. So each level, I mean, the levels aren't huge levels. They're basically, each level's probably about 2 screens, like if you look at just what's on the screen in the game, worth of data. And that compressed down to about 90, I think it was 96 bytes per level. So, I mean, I can't remember the numbers exactly, but it's somewhere around there.
Cool.
Nice. Like, are you practically done at this point, or?
Yeah, the game's pretty much done. If I was to put it on a cartridge and send it out, I would be happy with it. I've done a lot of testing, tested with a few friends, my girlfriend, my kid. So I feel pretty happy as far as that goes. There's right now there's 64 levels in the game. There's 15 different types of enemies, 4 boss battles. It's sort of it's a puzzle platformer. So the levels they're not incredibly huge, and more collection based. So you have to collect a certain number of fish per level to proceed to the next one, except for the boss battles where it's kill the boss.
And so, what kind of variety is there in those levels? Like, is it all kind of like the similar Arctic environments, or is it like, I don't know, like a Mega Man game, for example, where it just can be different from level to level, or?
It's all fairly similar, but I tried to have at least some variation in the environments. There's a lot of palette swapping because it's the NES. That's a very easy way to make things look varied on the NES. But I have different types of terrain. Like there's sort of just regular stone ground. Right. There is snow, which is more of like the I don't know if the best I can compare it to is like, you know how in Mario 2 where they sort of had those grass hills and they were sort of semi solid, so you could walk in front of them but jump on top of them. There's trees, there's ice. The ice is slippery. There's snow blocks that you can break, and that's sort of where some of the puzzle aspect comes into things. And just some of the various characters of the game, like there's a walrus in the game. You can poke him with a stick and move him around and jump on him and use him as a platform. There's a fish in the spaceship with a claw that sort of scoops down, picks you up, and you can use him as transportation. So there's some variation. There's a limit to how much I was able to put in each level too before the game started slowing down, getting sprite flickery and that sort of thing. Right. Good old NES.
But that's what's fun, right? Is dealing with that. I think, and that's what I mean. You put it on the NES because you want to recreate some of that, right?
Yeah, exactly. So then, and it's funny because then there'd be some levels it would be like, okay, something's causing sprite flicker in this level. And would I want to actually go through the engine and try to find out what was causing it, or do I just think, oh, I have one too many enemies in this level, so I'll just erase one and it fixes everything? So I kind of lean more towards that because messing with the engine too much, it seemed to just bog things down more. So
a little bit brittle when working with NES.
Oh, for sure, because there's only so much you can do. But it does feel pretty solid though.
Good. Cool. So, okay, well, I'd be happy to, at some point anyway, give the game a try.
Yeah. So one thing that I guess I'm curious about is what's your hardware situation on this? Like, are you testing this mostly on your PC, or are you doing this on an actual NES as well from time to time? Like, are you testing, I guess, on an LCD monitor with square pixels, or do you have something that has a CRT, or...
I've been testing on both, actually. Usually it's been testing with an emulator just because it's quick. But I do have a flash cart that I've been flashing the ROM to that I can test on. I've been testing it on both my the AVS, the retro USB AVS clone that I have, and on actual NES hardware, which usually I just have it hooked up to my regular LCD, but I actually did test it out. My friend has one of those really old CRTs with a dial on the side that's like 13 inches.
Nice.
Played through on that for a while, so it's been tested on a pretty good variety of screens and hardware. So.
Nice.
Is your friend my parents? Is that the TV in the basement?
No, it's actually Phelan.
Okay.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a point of contention for Matt and I a lot of the time, is that like a lot of those old games are designed to be played on that type of TV. And
I'm the purist, and
oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, I had to make sure it would look good if it was played there.
pretty important. I guess a question that comes up for me, what's involved with producing NES cards? Like, I mean, you mentioned like the flash card you're using to test with. Ultimately, what you release, is that going to look like that, or are you going to basically have kind of hard flash chips? Like, how do you do that?
Okay, there's a guy I was talking to. It's actually with Infinite NES Lives is the name of the website, but
Can you say that again?
Infinite NES Lives.
Okay.
Yeah, they've actually got various flash-based cartridges that I can get a bulk order from them, and I'm actually using one of their cartridges now. I've got the I think it's called a Kazo. It lets me write to the cartridge, and but if I do a bulk order, if I was to send them a ROM, they can already have them pre-flashed for me. So I'll have a whole bunch of pre-flashed boards that I just have to screw together and assemble.
nice.
So yeah,
So
that'll be.
So I guess in that sense, if you're going to be screwing stuff together, you're almost hoping that your Kickstarter doesn't get too carried away.
Well, I am already on the hook for about 200 of them, so
Yeah.
or close to it. That's just off the top of my head. But there's a few people not on Kickstarter as well that've been requesting them. So
I can picture like what the very first Apples, the guys in the garage like screwing on like 70 chips per computer and to sell to people.
oh yeah. Well, luckily I don't have to do any soldering. That would be that would be worse. At least this is just 5 screws per cartridge and a label.
Yeah.
So could be worse.
Nice.
Nice. But yeah, so I guess in that lines, like, you obviously didn't get a hold of an actual like NES debug like developer's toolkit or anything, right? Like you're
nothing like that. No, it's all pure homebrew here.
Were you working on this before you thought to release it? Like, I mean, I myself have thought many times to kind of work on these little Nintendo projects, and I've had something running in an emulator, but not really brought it past that. So I'm just curious if this was something you wanted to do, like when you started the project, or if it just grew into this.
It pretty much grew into it, and it grew pretty quickly. But it was originally just sort of hacking around, playing with it, and I thought it just sort of grew into something. I thought this actually feels like it could be a pretty decent little game. So as it sort of grew into that, I just sort of let it grow.
Awesome. Well, what I was actually going to ask, cliche question maybe, but I am very curious. I mean, just what was the most enjoyable part for you working on an NES game? And also, I mean, I guess the second half of that, what, I guess, were the pain points? Like, what were you stuck on, or what took way longer than you'd expect?
I mean, just the whole idea of I'm making an NES game and I'm putting it on a cartridge and testing it on real hardware. Just every single time I did that was just so much fun for me. Just, I don't know, just the idea of the fact that I'm able to do that. If I could have seen myself as a kid that I would be able to do that even just for fun, that was just fun. It was hard for me to pick out what my favorite part was, if it was because I'm not sure I really did it in a super professional way as far as it comes to actual game design, level design. It sort of grew organically, but it was just a very fun process altogether.
Cool. So just making it come to life, I guess, was overall that experience. Yeah, okay.
So was there any particular part of it, though? Like, do you prefer to do the programming versus like the animation, for example? Or
yeah, I think the programming is fun. I really enjoy doing, say, like the enemy behavior, that sort of thing, because it's always just been fun for me, the idea that I can that I can take, like, what looks like a character moving on the screen is basically just a few equations.
Right.
And it's just, that's always just been fun. Just that the idea behind that is fun, and knowing that if I just change a few numbers here and there, it can completely change how a character moves.
Nice. So what kind of AI do you have for that then? Like, is it anything that actually has intelligence to it, or is it hard coded, or? Because I know a lot of games in the past would, like, the character movement would be hard coded; it never deviated from that at all.
Yeah, there is a little bit with some of the characters. Nothing extremely, complex. But I mean, there's some characters that are just sort of the typical NES characters. They'll walk back and forth on a platform. If they hit the edge, they'll go back, or jumping at certain intervals. And then I tried to make some characters that are a little more interesting, though, that react to the player. So it's sort of, if you're standing on the same platform, like say there's a Viking in the game, if he walks fairly slowly, he seems fairly non-threatening, but if you stand on the same platform as him, suddenly his movement speeds up twice as fast, so he becomes more threatening. Or there's I've got spiders that go up and down trees, and if you approach the tree, the spider will it'll change directions and it'll come right down the tree twice as fast at you. So do have a few that react to the player. There's a narwhal. The narwhal is evil. It's basically it's like the big fish that tries to eat you in Mario 3.
Right.
Yeah, that's probably it's fairly simple stuff. That's most complex I have, because it's where it actually has aggression towards the player instead of just moving passively.
Very cool. I have to make the obnoxious comment. It's the first time in forever I've heard someone say Mario instead of Mario. I'm pretty sure it's a Canadian thing.
Yeah, that's a Nova Scotia thing.
Yeah,
it
sure.
might be. Because in Canada people say Mazda. Here they say Mazda. That's the other. So there's that thing.
Yeah, I was actually going to comment when you first got on the line that your Nova Scotia accent's particularly less than what I remember it being.
Mine?
No, Thomas's. Well, the last time that I was living in Nova Scotia, I was living in Pictou County, so I still in my memory have a much stronger accent in my head.
I was born in Pictou County.
Yeah. I've been here forever, son. I don't even pay attention to it.
Do you have any idea what the first game was that you ever played?
Probably the very first. My parents got us this really crappy old Pong console before I actually had an NES. So that would be the first game I played.
Nice.
First NES game was Super Mario Brothers Duck Hunt. Not sure which of those two, but it was one of them.
Nice. So you obviously played the console stuff. Did you ever get into like arcade stuff at all, or?
I didn't really get too much into arcade stuff. I do remember when there was the arcade at the mall, playing Street Fighter 2 with some friends a few times. But it was way more about the home consoles than the arcade back in the day.
Right. So is it safe to say NES is your favorite one then, if you're working on a project for that?
Oh yeah, definitely. It just, I don't know. There's something about it was my first real console, so it just has that sort of special place. The NES and the Game Boy. I always liked the Game Boy. I remember even when I got the Super Game Boy for the Super Nintendo, I played more Game Boy games on my Super Nintendo than actual Super Nintendo games. Mm-hmm. But just something about the 8-bit Nintendo systems, both of them. I just love them both.
Nice. I totally hear you on the Game Boy. To me, NES is like, it's the first system you can go back to. And I mean, a big part of that might be my own personal nostalgia. I don't know, but I just think the advances the system had, like, it was the first system, I think. I mean, I'm coming from console land here, but it was the first system you could save, for example. The first mainstream system with saving, and, coming from like Atari and a lot of those other games where it's like there's the replay value and the ability to tell a story was kind of much more limited, I guess.
Oh, for sure.
Plus, once the NES came out, you could tell everyone that you were playing with power.
Exactly.
Superpower. I'm ready to wait for superpower. Portable power in a few years.
Yeah. No, but man, some of those Game Boy games though, like Link's Awakening, I mean, that's some solid gameplay for black and white 8-bit system.
The original Final Fantasy Adventure?
Yeah.
Final Fantasy Legends as well was my favorite.
Legends was okay.
Well, Legends 2 was my favorite.
Legends 2 was good.
Yeah, Legend 2 was
I did beat Legend 1. I suffered all the way through it. 2 was good. 3 was good-ish. Yeah.
3 felt too much like Mystic Quest for me. I don't know.
Was it the jumping?
Maybe. Just the whole, I don't know. It felt like it was a... I don't know.
You're right, actually. I feel you.
It was just very similar. I don't know. It wasn't as limited, but it just felt like it. I don't know. 2 was my favorite one of those.
So are we saying we don't like Mystic Quest?
I mean, it was all right for what it was, but it wasn't exactly something I'd go back and play.
I hated it. I'll just come out and say it.
If I was
Final Fantasy for babies.
If I was going to give a Final Fantasy game to a 6-year-old, I would give them Mystic Quest and hope for the best.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I think I'm the only person I've ever met that enjoyed it.
I think I enjoyed it at points. I just wouldn't go back to it with fond memories.
Right.
I tried. It didn't work.
So outside of the Game Boy, then, do you have a favorite game of all time, or a favorite genre of all time, or?
I mean, I'm probably going to sound pretty typical, but I'd say Chrono Trigger is my favorite of all time, even though it's not NES. But I mean, it's hard to find any fault in Chrono Trigger.
It's a solid choice.
It's just an amazing game, and I feel like it's so weird how like Square Enix is so stubborn as to not do anything with that property.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's kind of disappointing because not only are they not doing anything with the property, but I remember a few years back there were people that was working on kind of an ambitious remake of it, and then that kind of just got canceled. Which, I understand on the one hand they want to protect their property, but it's also a shame to shut fans down when they are pushing on something like that.
Well, yeah, and it's not like they had anything else that they were working on themselves. Aside from, the DS version, which whoop-de-doo.
You didn't like that endless fetch quest, extra dungeon?
It was meaningless. It was just, it didn't add anything.
You're Chrono Trigger purist.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what was it like for you reviving this IP then? Was it... like we said earlier, it kind of just made sense to connect the dots, but how did your fan base respond? Like, if you hadn't touched this since 2013, was it, I don't know, fun to get back into it?
Oh yeah, definitely fun. And I feel like it was unexpected for a lot of people, because it's not like this was a project I particularly had announced to anybody. I just sort of did it in my spare time over it took probably about 3 months. So just in my spare time, over the course of about 3 months, suddenly I have a complete NES game using an IP that a lot of people haven't thought of for like 10 or 15 years. So I just spring this on people, and I have a Kickstarter, and they go, wait, what? And I actually did post about it in April when I was working on it. I posted on the Eskimo Bob Facebook, which is, it's a fairly small Facebook page because most Eskimo Bob stuff is before social media.
Right.
But there's a few people that have been kicking around, and a lot of people thought like, oh, there's an April Fool's joke. He's making an Eskimo Bob NES game. Then a couple weeks later, or a month later or so, well, whatever, it's not long later, there's an actual Kickstarter and there's an actual playable demo, and people are going, wait, what? That's a thing? So it's pretty funny. And just the number of people that thought, whoa, that's a name I haven't heard in a long time. That's the type of comment that I'm seeing, and it's kind of cool seeing that it's something that people remembered, and because I was looking at it as a thing like, okay, not even expecting many people are going to remember it or anyone's going to really care, but it was more like, if I could get enough money to do a run of carts and sell them online, that would be cool. It just seemed like it would be a fun thing to do, and I mean, it's to make NES carts, it's not free, so you kind of have to go through Kickstarter or something like that just to get, a few grand so that you can invest in materials. But I mean, right now it got funded really fast, and that's what surprised me the most.
Were you like totally not expecting success here? Like, did you expect it to get funded at all?
Well, I had looked at other projects for NES games, and I found a lot of the time if there was something tangible there was a pretty good chance that it would get funded. Because, I mean, there's an NES homebrew community, which I'm sort of just introducing myself to, and a lot of the people who are into that seem pretty dedicated, and they've all been really good, actually, even though most of them I haven't even talked to before. They've all been very good and very supportive, which is cool. But it's sort of a small enough community that there are not a lot of new releases coming out. So if something does come out, people get excited for it. So I thought, okay, there's a good chance I can at least get a bit of money, even if I'm coming out of nowhere. But I just didn't think that it would necessarily be one of those projects that's funded immediately and then just keeps getting funded, because it's sort of, I looked up a lot, and I had tried to do sort of a reboot project for Eskimo Bob a few years ago, and that was a dismal failure. Yeah, on Kickstarter. It was it was really poor. The Kickstarter campaign was really poorly thought out. It had terrible rewards. It was a failure. I got like less than $1,000, and it wasn't funded, and I was like, okay, people just aren't interested in this, and I gave up for a few years. So then I coming back to it 3 years later, coming out with a game, and I had a goal of 7,000 Canadian, and that was funded within 2 days. I was thinking, okay, that's pretty great. It was a big change. But I had done a lot of research into Kickstarter and making better reward tiers, and this time I actually had a real physical product instead of, if you give me money, I'll reboot a cartoon series that I used to do for free. So yeah. I mean, I've backed stuff in the past, and it definitely there's more incentive to back something that has a playable demo and has the signs that it's going to be followed through to completion. Like, there's a few things that I backed that it's like 5 years ago that still haven't delivered. So for me at least, it's hard to get that excitement on a Kickstarter thing unless... Well, that's a thing, right? A lot of people have been burned. Yeah. People get burned on Kickstarter.
Particularly games.
Yeah, and that's where I thought, it's like, okay, I feel like I have a game that's complete. I might do a little bit of beta testing or whatever, but I have... I've got 64 levels that are playable here, and I'll throw out a demo. I'll put videos on YouTube, a gameplay. I'll show people that there's an actual real thing that they can be playing. I have a prototype cartridge that works on hardware. So at least it's something that I feel like people can believe this is a thing that will happen, instead of it just being one of these pipe dream, check out my concept art type deals.
Yeah.
And on that note, I guess, are most of your backers former fans, or do you think you're pushing into new grounds here? Like, I don't know how much of that you can tell. Like, I haven't done a Kickstarter, but
I've talked to a few people, and there's definitely some people who are former Eskimo Bob fans. There's some that it's just they're interested in a new NES game. There's a few people from back in the old ROM hack days on IRC. Few people from back in those days that I have not talked to forever, and I'm seeing these names, and it's like, it's funny because I'll see they'll have their real name, and then they'll talk to me and be like, oh, it's Gideon Z, or it's Balls, or it's like all these guys who I haven't talked to forever. Just names that I mean, Matt would know who these are.
Yeah, I was actually just going to ask, were you guys doing the ROM hacking stuff at the same time, or?
Pretty much. Yeah. Actually, it kind of. I don't know if you being Thomas were solely the reason I got involved, but it was certainly a huge, I guess, inspiration, if you will, for me. I remember, actually, it was funny because
if memory serves, my parents decided they'd take a trip to Texas or somewhere, and they dumped me at Thomas's house for a week. And I think at that point we hadn't even, I don't know if we'd hung out much recently, but I went over, and it's like, I remember that was in 1998, and you guys were like playing with emulators, and you had your system set out, and had like introduced me to all these new games I was super excited about. And I had actually packed my NES up like a few months earlier and decided, I'm in junior high now. I'm gonna like try and get a girlfriend and not play so many video games and whatever, which didn't work. But anyway, I just remember after that. I remember actually before the trip was over, it was like the third day of seeing you guys with all your system set up and stuff, and getting so excited that I went back to my parents' house because I had a key. Went in and like set up all the games like alone in my parents' empty house, and like was playing Zelda on the weekend and stuff. But anyway, that I think it was that trip or parents trip or whatever, me not going anywhere, where I really got involved in emulations. So that was pretty much the same time, I'll say.
Yeah, I remember that actually.
So what kind of stuff were you doing back in those days? Were you like trying to just hack in your own graphics on top, or?
It was mostly about translation. So I was really, really heavily into like JRPGs at the time. So, and that's when it was the late 90s, and that's sort of when everyone realized, hey, there are more Final Fantasy games out there than we realize. So the release of 7 kind of exactly.
I was going to say that was the era. That was the era to me anyway. Before like people put a J in front of RPG. Like at least if you were a console, it was just
gamer, an RPG. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. But yeah, so it was pretty much around that time. So me and Alan
being your brother.
Yeah, my brother. Yeah.
Context. Yes.
Context. Yes, that helps.
Yeah.
But we got it into our head that we were going to translate Final Fantasy 2 and 3 for the Famicom. And there were already projects underway with people way more experienced than us working on it. But we thought, we're going to do this first because we were in high school and we were idealistic. So we came out with our own hacky little partial translations of those. And, we had those out there. And it was a small enough community that people noticed that we were also working on these games. But then anyway, the real fan translations came out shortly afterwards, and we dropped those and started working on our own games instead. So there were a few games that we did actually end up fully translating. Glory of Heracles 2, that was the biggest game that
you've never heard of.
Yes, that was and Matt actually helped me with some of the Japanese on that. So
that's a very good game, actually. I was just gonna kind of take note. It's interesting to me, anyway. I mean, this is the late '90s, and it's interesting that like games of that caliber were actually still kind of up for grabs. That like little teams of people in small towns could just try and translate a Final Fantasy and be the first in the world to release an English Final Fantasy. Like,
I know, it's
just
crazy.
blows my mind now.
Yeah,
but it was back when I think the actual companies still looked at those as basically disposable entertainment and didn't realize that the kids that grew up with them would actually still want to play them.
Yeah.
And it's sort of...
Didn't realize they'd be on Steam in 25 years.
Yeah. Exactly. And all of us who were kids back then, we were coming into our own, and we were teenagers, and we actually had some technical knowledge and the ability to sort of hack together these translations. So.
It's kind of silly looking at it now because like Square Enix can't stop releasing like different versions of Final Fantasy 1 through 6.
Oh yeah.
It took them a long time to come up with 3, I'll say that.
Yeah.
It did. This is true.
Yeah, but even that's on Steam now.
Yep. Yeah, it's funny.
So as someone who's gone through the original translation for that, what's your take on that? Do you still prefer the original Famicom, or how about this newfangled 3D version?
I mean, the Famicom, I've got something for the originals. It's always kind of bugged me, especially with 3, that they never gave us a 2D version in English officially still to this day. It's always just some variation of the DS version, which really is different.
I'm biting my tongue.
At least with the other ones, you've got something similar, but with 3, they still never really gave us the original.
Yeah.
That's always kind of bugged me a bit.
Yeah. I find the DS one to be quite a different game, and
It is.
it's the same, but with like these weird, I don't know, kind of like distractions inserted or something. I don't know. I really felt they mangled it.
It is, because I
tend to
mean,
be
you
pretty
can
retro.
even something like 2, where it's like, okay, so it's been upgraded with sort of Super Nintendo-y looking graphics on the Game Boy Advance, but at least it still feels like the same game. But with 3, they made that DS version. It's quite a bit different. They took these blank slate characters and tried to give them actual character, and then the pacing is different, and it just feels different.
Yeah, and it's one of those. It's kind of. I felt like it was the same jarring experience as with Mega Man to me, where like you play the older Mega Mans, and they're of course pixelated, and you kind of imagine your own characters, and they look really cool. And then as graphical capabilities get better, and you get into like Mega Man 7, 8, it's like, whoa, this is what he's supposed to look like. This was his voice the whole time.
I know that voice.
3, everyone looks so badass in the original like Final Fantasy 3. I mean, it's pixels, whatever, but they just look cool to me.
Yeah.
And then when they released it for the DS, and it was like all those like big head like cutesy characters, I don't know, it really was not for me.
It was weird, but I mean, they did it to 4 as well, but I feel like it was, at least with 4, we had the original to play in English, so it wasn't so jarring.
I mean, I've always found that weird with 4 too, just because like that's probably my favorite in the franchise, and like I remember playing it on the Super Nintendo and just absolutely loving it. And then eventually you realize that, like, supposedly the translation's not good, because I never bothered to learn Japanese enough to be able to play the original. But then, they came out with the Game Boy Advance version. You play that and it's got extra dungeons and stuff, and the translation's completely different, and you're like, which do I prefer? And then the DS version came out, and that's, again, completely different. And you're like...
Oh, yeah. The DS one I found, it almost felt like they went out of their way to translate things differently just to prove that it was different. Because even with, like, the whole Mysidian legend with the, like, one to be born of a dragon, it has some, like, he who gapes from Dragon Maw or something weird. I'm like, what? Like, they're just... the whole thing felt strange.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I guess if you grow up with something and have a completely different version thrown at you, it's going to feel weird.
Yeah. And so, like I said, I mean, I never played the original Japanese version, so I don't know how true any of them are to the original. And yet, there are these 3 different versions that I can play, and I don't know, at least it feels like there is incentive to play them. Like, it's not just a pure re-release on the different platforms.
Just play the fan translation. I'd say it's gonna be the closest in most cases. I mean, no joke. Like, seriously, like, people who do fan translations, their goal is to replicate the original as closely as possible. Right? The companies who translate, they just want something that's accessible or like localized well, or censored in the right places. Like, it's gonna be different, right?
Yeah. So I guess trying to get back on topic.
Apologies. I was about to make a comment maybe 10 minutes ago.
Yeah. But that being said, so I noticed a post you added on Facebook this week about Steam Greenlight. So along those lines, are you planning on having any sort of difference between 2 different platforms? Like, if you're going to release for NES and also for PC, are you going to do anything differently for those versions, or are they going to be essentially the same?
I'm going for essentially the same. I'm not being so cheap as to just have it be like, here's an emulator with a ROM.
Right.
I want it to feel like a PC game, but at the same time feel like the NES game. So, since most of the engine I did in C, it's fairly easy to port that over to a modern platform so that the game will feel the same. And I've got all the pixel art and everything. I can just use all that. So it's going to look and feel like the NES version, but it will have, maybe just some slight, just little things that you don't even really notice so much with the NES, like mixing sound channels and stuff like that.
Right.
At least you don't have to think about that stuff with the PC version. So.
Are you going to emulate scanlines?
Maybe. Didn't really think about it. I was thinking, I'm not sure if I was going to. I was thinking of maybe having some sort of toggle so I could switch between the 8-bit graphics and then have it look like the Flash versions from the cartoon for the characters, but I'm not sure if I want to do that or not. I might. It would be a pretty easy thing to do, but I'm like, oh, would that ruin the integrity of the game? But I haven't really gotten there yet, so that's the only real difference that might possibly be in there. Other than that, I mean, I'm still planning on going with like a 4:3 aspect ratio, and I might put like a little border or something on it. It's going to look like an NES game.
Right. When you say that would be easy to do, like, have you already tested that, or would you have to generate all the Flash-looking graphics from scratch, or?
Well, I mean, I already have the Flash graphics because I still have all the original source files from the Flash cartoons. So, and all the characters come from there, so it would be pretty trivial for me to just take the graphics out of the old Flash files, export them.
Right. I guess I was just more curious if you did like convert it into sprite sheets or like actually.
Yeah, I would probably convert them into sprite sheets, but the animation's pretty simple. It was never a very complex animated show.
I guess a question I meant to ask when we were talking about more like designing the game and so forth. Where it is an NES game, I'm just curious if you kind of just set out and made the game, or if you maybe like kind of studied some other games first, or kind of, I mean, many of us still play NES games, but we've also moved on to newer systems as well. Like, I feel like if I was to go and make an NES game, I'd want to maybe play a whole bunch of NES games first to really gauge what the system is capable of and what works in that environment and go with it. I'm just wondering if you had any experience with like doing something like that, or did you just kind of go for it?
I pretty much just went for it, to be honest. It was mostly just, I was working on this thing. Took a tutorial, I started throwing my own graphics in and thought, okay, how can I make this work? And then I just thought, it would be cool if I could swap characters, and I had Alfonso and he poked something with a stick, and then I'd start thinking, well, if he pokes something with a stick, what should he poke with a stick? And if he pokes something with a stick, then should Bob be able to do something else? So I came up with the idea that Alfonso can poke blocks with a stick and attack enemies by poking with a stick, but Bob can jump a little bit higher, and he can also punch downwards, because I thought just jumping higher didn't make Bob appealing enough to play with. I needed to give him something that Alfonso couldn't do. And where breaking blocks is very important in the game, where Alfonso can break them above his head by jumping or to the side by poking, but he can't break downwards, then Bob can break downwards, but he can't break sideways. So it forces you to use different characters in different situations. I guess that kind of went all over the place, that explanation.
Well, it's okay, actually. Well, my follow-up question, I guess, is like, were there any games particularly that inspired you? Like, I don't know if you played the game. If I was to play the game, would I feel like, this feels like Mega Man? This feels like MC Kids? Is there something?
I'm really not sure I can think of an NES game that it feels exactly like.
Cool.
I did hear somebody compare it to. Actually, this is a funny one too, because where my game's a side scroller, it doesn't really make sense. But I heard somebody say it felt like Lolo, and that's kind of funny because I mean, Lolo is
the
not
look and feel, maybe.
No, but the gameplay, apparently, even though it's like, but I guess if Lolo was a side scroller, because where you have small levels and you have to collect stuff to beat the level. Right. I don't know.
Right.
It's not really the same, in my opinion, but someone made that comparison. I thought, that kind of makes sense. Actually, when I was playing it, I was originally... I don't even know where the sentence is going. Might as well cut that part out. No idea.
Redacted.
Redacted. No, but okay, I'll just go with the Lolo thing. Someone compared it to Lolo. That's the only comparison I've heard anyone compare it to. It's definitely not like Mario. It's not like Mega Man.
Mario.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's say you had to go back and start all over again. Is there anything that you would change, or I guess along those same lines, is there any advice that you would give to other people if they were to start of what to avoid or what they should be doing instead? Or?
As far as for NES, I mean, it all came together really. It felt like it came together a lot more quickly than I expected, and I kind of feel like I'm still going through it, so I'm not even sure I would know
3
what
months
to give for
is super
advice
impressive,
yet.
I think.
Yeah, like it just kind of. It's hard to explain, but it just feels like it just kind of happened, and it's hard for me to say like what I would do differently because I haven't had a lot of time to reflect yet.
Is there a sequel in the works?
Maybe. I wouldn't mind doing it if I had the time. I haven't really thought about it yet until I get this one out there, though.
Super Eskimo Bob.
I have had a lot of people ask about 2-player, which is not something in the game, so that might be something I'd explore if I do a sequel.
Nice.
Cool.
So are you? I guess you are just kind of focused on getting this out the door at the moment. There's no big grandiose plans for what comes next.
No, pretty much. That's pretty much it. A lot of it too. This is backtracking a little bit, but a lot of the idea of making it was originally just sort of come up with something different to throw in a portfolio, where I'm just finishing up school and I'm going to be looking for jobs, and I'm thinking, okay, I've got a few tech demos and things that I made in Unity, but nothing that really stood out. So I thought maybe if I made a little NES game, it would be something that could stand out as a portfolio piece. And then I was like, this feels like more than a portfolio piece. It feels like something that people actually would want to play.
Right. So, I mean, like Matt just said, 3 months is pretty impressive. I guess you've been pretty focused on this. Like, what does your week kind of look like as you're working on this?
There's a lot of not leaving my bedroom. And it's funny because during this whole Kickstarter process, I feel like it's changed again because suddenly I have to actually care about social media, and stuff like that to get people interested. But before that, it was a lot of just sort of, okay, well, I'm doing my course. I had one course, so I'm doing one course. I have a fair amount of free time, so when I'm not working on an assignment, I was basically working on this game, and working on a game was more fun than playing games, so it just sort of, because it was fun to do, I put a lot of time into it. So it's hard for me to say how many hours exactly I put into it over those 3 months, but I would say probably a fair amount. There was a lot of testing too, especially once I felt like I had a good game engine and I got into the level design. There was a lot of, okay, I'll make, I got to the point where I was making probably about 4 levels a day for the game, and I'd sort of make these levels and I'd play them over and over and over again. And when my girlfriend got off work, she'd come over and she would be like, oh, do you have any more levels? I want to play them. And that made it really exciting to have a girlfriend that was excited about my game and wanting to play it as it's being developed, because it was good having that encouragement and support.
Nice. So if you've been kind of just locked up in your bedroom for the past 3 months, that means you've missed out on like Horizon Zero Dawn and Nier Automata and the new Zelda.
Oh man, I haven't played. No, actually, it's funny because I got the new Zelda. I played it for maybe 2 days, and then I was like back to developing, and I was thinking, that was a really good game. I wouldn't mind playing it some more, but I hardly touched it, and everyone else is raving about it.
Yeah.
I was going to say, just have 2 kids, and you don't need to lock yourself in the room. You just miss everything without much effort.
Yeah, pretty much.
I'm just quietly sitting here and waiting for chances to make sarcastic comments.
Yeah.
Ignore me if you want.
It's all good.
I guess a question that comes to mind with the Kickstarter, back to the Kickstarter, are you at all concerned? I mean, I see that you're making stretch goals, that you're maybe overextending yourself. Like, obviously, we talked about the PC version, and you seem to think maybe it's super easy, but something about me, something I always thought about doing a Kickstarter is that it would be
it's scary to kind of overpromise and then just be like in this situation where you're like, whoa, right? Like, do you have any fears like that at all? Or are you pretty confident it's not going to be an issue?
Yeah, that's pretty much where I'm actually at with the whole stretch goal thing, because I just hit my second stretch goal, which was I'm going to have a better PC version instead of just an emulated port. And I haven't put out another stretch goal past there, and I feel like I might not. Because the thing is that, like, I had two stretch goals. One of them was I'm gonna write a little comic in the instruction manual. I tried to aim small for the stretch goals because I do find a lot of Kickstarters they'll start to overcompensate with the stretch goals, and I become very skeptical that these things will actually happen. Like when I start seeing, look at this little homebrew game that I'm making, stretch goal, there's going to be a PS4 version. I'm thinking, can you guarantee that? Or are you just saying that because you hope it? So, and I didn't want to do anything like that, so I thought, okay, PC version, I feel like that was a doable stretch goal, because even if, I could put it on Steam Greenlight, even if it isn't greenlit, I know I can find another distribution method for a PC version. And I gave it an estimated date of next January for when everything is done. So I thought, this is a game that took me 3 months to develop. If I was to rewrite the engine, I already have all the levels designed and everything, and I basically just have to port the game engine over. I feel like if I gave myself, 6-7 months to do that, that's more than reasonable.
Yeah.
As far as getting the actual cartridges made up and stuff, that's something I haven't done before, but I thought, the game is already programmed and it's just manufacturing and shipping essentially. I feel like I think you called that out in your
I think you called that out in your risks and challenges as well. So.
I did.
On the Kickstarter.
Yeah, so because it is basically just the manufacturing process. Aside from I've been playing the heck out of the game and trying to get as many of my friends to as I can as well, just to get just to make sure it doesn't have any bugs or anything. But I'm fairly confident that it's pretty solid at this point. So now that part is all behind me, it's essentially just putting it on a cartridge. It's more about I have to give myself enough time to do that, because I want to make sure that everything's shipped to me and it's sent out on time. But I feel like 6 or 7 months is definitely enough breathing room. If it's out earlier, that would be cool. If it was out a little bit later, hopefully not, but I feel it wouldn't be much later than that.
You could always throw yourself under the bus and give yourself a new stretch goal of adding multiplayer.
That would be a horrible idea.
Yes, it would.
I feel like I've got maybe last time I checked the ROM, I had 5 bytes to work with of empty space or something.
But it's too late, right? We've brought it up multiple times in this interview, so
yeah.
Oh yeah, no. Yeah, exactly. No, yeah, definitely a multiplayer. No, not happening. But
right.
Yeah. See, I didn't want to do anything that I felt like it wasn't reasonable. Having a slightly fancier instruction manual, to me, that it's not that exciting, but it felt reasonable. And then after I got through the 2 stretch goals, I thought, I haven't actually gotten much feedback or enthusiasm from people about these stretch goals, so maybe I should just have some confidence in the product that I have that people seem to like and roll with that instead. Just feels safer, and
It seems like to an extent you're safer because you have an NES game, where you just said you've only got a few bytes remaining of empty space. I think maybe that's a problem that people don't have, is when they're developing a PC game, they've got infinite space theoretically, so that allows them to get carried away with those stretch goals and just start promising all these extra characters and stuff. And
exactly, the most I could promise is maybe a palette swap or something. There's not much left I can do as far as that goes, especially where I feel like the game's already complete. And that's the thing too, with an NES game as opposed to a PC game, I have to be really careful that I've played through this game like 1 billion times and have not run into any bugs because I can't just issue a patch.
Yeah.
This is going to be on a cartridge and it's going to be out there. So I'm going to, for a couple of months, maybe, I don't know. I'll probably be playing this game until I'm absolutely sick of it and doing every stupid thing I can possibly think of to try to break it in game just to make sure someone else can't. And I've been doing that already. And I mean, I found one thing actually the other day, for example, and it was when I was playing it, testing it with a friend. I have a death counter in the game, so and it's baked into the password system. And so, at the end of the game, you get a nicer looking credit screen if you've gotten through the game without dying a certain number of times and that sort of thing. Anyway, as I'm playing with my friend, he overflowed the death counter and glitched the credit screen. So, and it's something I hadn't actually run into. I thought I had a failsafe, but it obviously didn't work. So I've got that fixed now. But it's just good to be able to play with people who might get into a situation that you don't.
People who die a lot.
Exactly. People who die a lot. Like, the most I played it since I implemented the death counter, I played through the game. I think I died 101 times. And I was like, okay, that's a lot of deaths. I'm good. So, and I thought I had it programmed so it could handle, up in the like, it was supposed to be 65,000 whatever deaths should have been fine. I was like, okay, nobody's going to hit that. But it was actually overflowing at 256. So, and he died more than 256 times, glitched out the end screen. And, it wasn't like game breaking, but it looked ugly. So I was like, okay, I got to find a better way to handle that. So, and I did. So
are there any bugs still present you're aware of? Am I allowed to ask that?
No, it's actually a pretty solid feeling. I haven't noticed anything. I've actually been working on doing a PAL version, and I'm pretty happy with that now. Because I've noticed I've got quite a few supporters from Europe, especially Denmark.
Are they expecting a PAL version?
Yes. And I haven't tested it on hardware. I've only tested that in emulators. So I've tested it in a couple of emulators, so fingers crossed it's fine. I haven't really changed the game engine at all. It's more just about making the music sound good, so the PAL version does run like slightly slower, but it's not exactly a fast-paced game anyway. So I feel like if that's the only version I ever played, I would not know the difference. That's the standard I've sort of been setting myself to, and looking at a lot of NES games, I feel that's sort of the NES standard anyway.
Yeah. I mean, that was the big complaint even with like Sonic the Hedgehog, was that it was slower in the UK, right?
Exactly. But Sonic marketed itself on speed.
Yeah.
I'm going with a fairly slow puzzle platformer, so running slightly slower isn't as much of a negative. I've got the music and sound effects pitched up so that they sound the same in both versions, and that gives almost the illusion that it's running at the same speed.
Right.
So I'm pretty happy with it. That's sort of the biggest challenge that I've come across recently is I asked people, because I noticed, and this, I'm seeing a lot of people. It was basically, I saw a lot of people from Europe, and I thought I'd put the question, is it important for European players if the game works on PAL consoles, or do you guys, are you guys importing NTSC hardware? Because I have no idea what happens in Europe as far as that goes. But most of them said they wanted a PAL version, so I think what I'm going to do is, once everything's said and done, I'll send out a survey, and I'll ask everybody, do you want the NTSC or PAL version?
Yeah, makes sense. That's actually something I'd never considered in the past. Like, but it seems quite obvious once you do have to start putting it out to hardware.
Well, that's the thing. If it's a PC game or something on something modern, you don't really have to think about that. But if people want to play this on an actual NES, then they're going to have different hardware.
No. Oh. Are you doing the podcast?
Yes, I'm doing the podcast.
Well, number 2 is coming on, and I was wondering if I could brush my teeth before it and then fall asleep watching it.
Yeah, if you want to.
Okay. Yay!
So now I know what it's like to have a 10-year-old.
Yeah, there you go.
And
He
so
talks
will
more.
the world.
Well, at least it's a long weekend here, so.
Right.
Nice.
Small digression. I apologize for it. I was listening to the radio or something the other day, and there was some article about, I forget, some popular toy or something, but there's some mother and her 10-year-old started choking on this thing, and they had to go to the doctor and like remove it out of their throat or something. And I just remember,
Was it
thinking,
fidget spinners?
Yes, that's
Yeah.
exactly what it was. Anyway,
Yeah.
I was thinking like, are you kidding me? Like 10-year-olds are still choking on stuff. Like when can I stop freaking out about my kid? Like,
I have a great story about those actually, because like they are definitely the popular thing right now. But in his school, they just had an announcement telling kids not to hold them against their teeth while they're spinning, because they have had a problem with kids holding these fidget spinners up against their teeth and cracking their teeth.
Nice.
And I'm just like, what kind of a kid is going to think, look at this fast metal ball bearing, I'm going to hold it against my teeth and see what happens?
well, it's better than choking.
I suppose, but still, it's pretty bad.
Oh, man.
I'll never understand what goes through kids' minds, but, you know, at least mine seems pretty smart when it comes to that stuff, so I'll be thankful.
All right, so it sounds like everything's going pretty well. You've got what?
17 days?
17 days as of today, but we're releasing this podcast in 4 more days, so you've got, looks like 12 more days or something, 11 more days left.
Yeah, and I mean, at this point...
17 minus 4 is 13.
Yeah, so it looks like it's going pretty well, and I'm glad that it's already hit its target, and let's see how high we can get this.
Yeah, congratulations. I don't know. I think offline I said congratulations. I mean, I think it's awesome. Like, as you mentioned, we've known each other a long time. Just cool to see you now coming out with a successful NES dev project. I think that's crazy, but it's it's nice to see.
Well, thanks.
Before we part ways, do you have any message that you want to communicate?
Eskimo Bob is a puzzle platformer game for the NES. It's brand new, fully programmed. It's available right now on Kickstarter. The project is fully funded, but there is actually a special edition white cartridge that will not be available after the Kickstarter. So if anyone is interested in having something that their friends won't have when it's done, you can definitely go pick up the white cartridge from Kickstarter right now.
Cool. All right. Well, Thomas, thank you for joining us. And
anytime.
Best of luck in the future. Yeah.
Thanks.
All right. Cheers.
All right. Take care, everybody.